The vultures had already started circling when Zachary Vaughn saw the woman sprawled face down in the dust, 20 feet from his ranch gate. Her dark hair matted with blood, and her dress torn beyond decency. He dropped the fence post he had been carrying and ran, his boots kicking up clouds of red Oklahoma dirt as his heart hammered against his ribs with a violence he had not felt since the war ended 15 years ago. The summer of 1881 was proving to be the hottest anyone in Beaver could remember, and leaving someone to die in this heat was a death sentence that would take mere hours to complete. Zachary fell to his knees beside her, his calloused hands surprisingly gentle as he turned her over. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, with fine features now covered in grime and bruises that spoke of violence recently inflicted. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her breathing shallow and rapid. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck and felt the thread of her pulse, weak but persistent. "Can you hear me?" he asked, knowing she could not answer. Her eyes remained closed, her body limp as a rag doll when he gathered her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, as if she had not eaten properly in weeks. He stood with effort, his 36-year-old body protesting the sudden movement after hours of manual labor, and carried her toward the house. The ranch was not much to look at, just a simple 2-room cabin with a lean-to addition he had built the previous winter, but it was clean and well-maintained. He kicked the door open and brought her inside, laying her on his own bed since it was the only one he had. The house was dim and cool compared to the brutal sunshine outside, and he quickly lit a lamp to see her injuries more clearly. Blood matted the left side of her head where something had struck her, and when he carefully probed the wound, he found it was deep but clean. Her dress was torn at the shoulder and down one side, revealing more bruises along her ribs and arms. He fetched water from the pitcher on his washstand and began cleaning her face with a cloth, watching as the dirt and blood slowly revealed pale skin beneath. "Who did this to you?" he murmured, not expecting an answer. "And what were you doing out here alone?" The nearest town was Beaver, 3 miles to the east, and his ranch sat at the westernmost edge of civilization before the land stretched into rough country that most sensible folks avoided. He had chosen this spot precisely because he wanted to be left alone, to work his cattle and his land without the complications of neighbors or social obligations. After what he had seen during the war, after losing his wife to fever just 2 years into their marriage, he had wanted nothing more than solitude. But now, this woman had collapsed at his gate, and he could not simply ignore her suffering. He spent the next hour cleaning her wounds, applying salve to the cuts and bruises, and wrapping her head with clean bandages he kept for the inevitable injuries that came with ranch work. Her breathing grew steadier as he worked, and some color returned to her cheeks when he managed to dribble water between her cracked lips. She swallowed reflexively, a good sign. When he had done all he could, he pulled a chair beside the bed and sat down to wait. Night fell outside, bringing cooler air through the windows he had propped open, and still she did not wake. He made himself coffee and forced down some cold beans from the pot he had made that morning, then returned to his vigil. It was near midnight when her eyes finally opened. She stared at the unfamiliar ceiling for a long moment, then turned her head slowly toward him. Her eyes were blue-gray like storm clouds and filled with fear. "You are safe," he said quickly, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "You collapsed outside my gate. I brought you inside and tended your injuries. My name is Zachary Vaughn. This is my ranch about 3 miles west of Beaver." She tried to speak but only managed a harsh croak. He stood and brought her more water, helping her lift her head to drink. She took several sips before pushing the cup away gently, "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I thought I was going to die out there." "You nearly did. What happened to you? Who hurt you?" Her eyes filled with tears that spilled down her temples into her dark hair. "My husband. My late husband, I should say. He died 3 days ago." Zachary frowned, confused. "Your husband is dead, but he hurt you." "No. He died of fever in Dodge City. I was traveling with a group heading south trying to get to my sister in Texas. But the wagon master, She closed her eyes, fresh tears flowing. "He said I could not afford passage anymore now that my husband was dead, said I could earn my way another method. When I refused, he beat me and threw me out on the road, told his men to leave me behind." Rage built in Zachary's chest, hot and fierce. "That is murder. He left you to die in the desert." "I walked for a day, maybe more. I do not remember all of it. The sun was so hot and I had no water. I saw your gate and thought maybe I could rest there just for a moment." She looked at him with those storm cloud eyes. "You saved my life." "What is your name?" "Miriam. Miriam Davis." "Well, Miriam Davis, you will stay here until you are well enough to travel. I will not hear any argument about it. That head wound alone could kill you if it gets infected." "I have no money to pay you," she said, her voice breaking. "Everything I had was in the wagon. My clothes, my husband's savings, everything. I did not ask for payment. Now rest. You need to heal." She studied his face for a long moment, searching for deception or hidden motives, but apparently found none. She nodded slightly and closed her eyes, asleep again within moments. Zachary sat back in his chair and rubbed his face with both hands. So much for solitude. So much for keeping the world at arm's length. But he could not have done anything differently. What kind of man would he be if he let a woman die when he could help her? The next morning, he woke stiff and sore from sleeping in the chair. Miriam was still asleep, her breathing even and deep, so he quietly made coffee and went outside to tend his animals. He had 20 head of cattle, 3 horses, and a handful of chickens that provided eggs. It was not a large operation, but it was enough to keep him fed and provide a modest income when he drove cattle to market twice a year. As he worked, his mind kept returning to Miriam. She was beautiful despite the bruises and injuries, with a delicate quality that seemed out of place in this harsh land. But there was also strength in her eyes, a determination that had kept her walking even when death was certain. What kind of life had brought her to Oklahoma Territory? What had her husband been like? When he returned to the house around noon, she was awake and sitting up in bed, looking around the simple room with curiosity. She turned as he entered, and he saw she had managed to rebraid her long, dark hair with shaking fingers. "You should be resting," he said, setting down the basket of eggs he had collected. "I have been resting for hours. I feel better, truly." She paused, then added, "I need to use the privy." "Oh, yes, of course." He helped her stand, noting how she swayed slightly and grabbed his arm for support. "It is out back. I will help you there." "I can manage," she said, but after 2 steps, her knees buckled. He caught her before she fell, swinging her up into his arms again. "Pride will not help you if you crack your skull open on my floor," he said, carrying her toward the back door. "Save your strength for healing." She did not argue further, though he felt the tension in her body, the discomfort of being dependent on a stranger. He waited outside the privy and then carried her back inside, setting her gently on the bed. "I made stew yesterday. Let me heat some for you." "You need to eat." "I do not want to be a burden," she protested. "You are not a burden. You are injured and I am helping. That is all." He heated the stew and brought her a bowl, watching as she ate slowly, clearly forcing down each spoonful. Her stomach had probably shrunk from lack of food, but she needed nourishment to heal. When she had eaten half the bowl, she set it aside and looked at him. "Why do you live out here alone?" she asked. "Are you married?" "I was once." She died of fever 7 years ago. We had only been married 2 years. I am sorry, he shrugged, though the old grief still twisted in his chest. It was a long time ago. I came out here after she died, wanted to build something new away from all the memories. It must be lonely. I prefer it that way. He realized how harsh that sounded and softened his tone. Or I thought I did. Maybe I have just gotten used to my own company. How long have you been ranching here? 5 years. Built this place myself, piece by piece. It is not fancy, but it keeps the rain out and the cold at bay during winter. They talked for a while longer, carefully skirting around the deeper wounds they both carried. He learned that she and her husband, Robert, had been married only 4 months when fever took him in Dodge City. They had been heading to Texas, where her sister lived with her husband on a small farm. Miriam had no other family, her parents dead, and her only brother killed in the war. I do not even know if my sister is still at that farm, Miriam admitted. The last letter I received from her was 2 years ago, but I had nowhere else to go. You can stay here as long as you need, Zachary heard himself say, surprising himself with the offer. Until you are fully healed and can decide what you want to do next. Relief washed over her face. Thank you. I will help however I can. I can cook and clean, mend clothes, tend a garden if you have one. I have a small vegetable patch, though it is struggling in this heat, and I will not say no to decent cooking. My skills in that area are limited to stew and beans. She smiled, and it transformed her face despite the bruises. Then we have an agreement. Room and board in exchange for housekeeping. Over the next week, Miriam grew stronger. The wound on her head began to heal cleanly, and the bruises faded from purple to yellow-green. She proved to be an excellent cook, transforming his meager supplies into meals that actually had flavor. She mended his clothes, organized his cluttered cabin, and tended the vegetable garden with a skill that suggested she had grown up doing such work. Zachary found himself looking forward to returning to the house each evening, to the smell of cooking food and the sight of her moving about the kitchen area. She hummed while she worked, old hymns mostly, and the sound filled the lonely spaces he had grown accustomed to. They talked during meals, sharing stories of their pasts. He told her about the war, about the things he had seen that made him want to leave civilization behind. She told him about growing up in Missouri, about her parents' small farm and how hard they had worked just to survive. Her husband Robert had been a store clerk with dreams of opening his own mercantile in Texas. He was a good man, she said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set. Gentle and kind, but I think we married more out of convenience than love. We were both alone, both looking for something stable. That is not uncommon, Zachary said. My wife Sarah and I loved each other, but it was a quiet sort of love, comfortable. Do you think that is enough? Comfortable love, he considered the question. I suppose it depends on what you are looking for. Some people need passion, others need peace. What do you need? The question caught him off guard. I do not know any more. I thought I needed solitude, but now. He trailed off, not sure how to finish that thought. She looked at him, her gray-blue eyes reflecting the orange sunset. Now I am not so sure. Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of the growing connection neither of them had planned on. Miriam looked away first, her cheeks flushing slightly. I should prepare supper, she said, standing quickly and going inside. Zachary remained on the porch, his heart beating faster than it should. He was drawn to her, he could not deny it. But what kind of man pursued a woman who had lost her husband mere weeks ago? What kind of man took advantage of someone dependent on him for survival? He resolved to keep his distance, to maintain proper boundaries. But it became increasingly difficult as the days turned into weeks, and Miriam continued to bloom under his care. She gained weight, filling out the dress he had bought for her during a trip to Beaver. Her hair grew glossy and thick, and she took to pinning it up in elaborate styles that framed her delicate features. The bruises faded completely, leaving smooth, pale skin that seemed to glow in the lamplight. And she was no longer just his patient. She was his companion, his partner in the daily work of keeping the ranch running. She helped him doctor a sick calf, standing knee-deep in mud to hold the animal while he administered medicine. She assisted with the branding, managing the fire and keeping the irons hot. She even rode out with him to check the fence lines, proving to be a competent horsewoman despite her slight frame. "My father taught me," she explained when he complimented her skills. "Said a woman should be able to handle a horse as well as any man. Your father was a wise man. He was practical. He knew my brother would not always be around to help, and he was right. Thomas died at Shiloh. I am sorry. I was at Shiloh too. Then you know how terrible it was." He nodded, the memories still vivid even after so many years. "I try not to think about it. Sometimes I wonder if that is why Robert and I never had the passionate love the novels talk about," she said thoughtfully. "We had both lost so much. We were both just trying to survive. Maybe we did not have anything left to give. Or maybe you just had not found the right person to be passionate about." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Miriam looked at him, her eyes wide, and he saw his own feelings reflected there. The attraction was not one-sided. She felt it too, this pull between them that grew stronger every day, but she turned away, focusing on the fence they were riding alongside. "This section needs repair. I will come out tomorrow and fix it." They rode back to the ranch in silence, but it was a charged silence, full of things neither of them dared to say. That night, Zachary lay awake on his pallet in the lean-to addition he had moved to after the first week, giving Miriam the main bedroom. He could hear her moving around inside, preparing for bed, and his imagination tortured him with images of her brushing out that long dark hair, removing the simple dress, lying down in his bed. He wanted her. He could admit that to himself in the darkness. But wanting her and acting on that want were two different things. She deserved better than to be pressured by the man who had saved her life, the man she depended on. She deserved time to heal, to grieve, to figure out what she wanted, even if waiting was killing him. August arrived with no relief from the heat. The cattle grew restless, and Zachary spent long days ensuring they had adequate water. Miriam took over more of the household tasks, including caring for the chickens and managing the vegetable garden, which had begun thriving under her attention. One afternoon, he returned to the house to find her standing in the kitchen area, staring at a piece of paper in her hands with tears streaming down her face. "What is wrong?" He crossed to her in 3 long strides. "Are you hurt? I received a letter. From Texas." Her voice was choked with emotion. "My sister. She died in childbirth last year. Her husband remarried 6 months ago. Miriam, I am so sorry. She was all I had left. All this time I thought I had somewhere to go, someone waiting for me, but she has been dead for a year and I did not even know." She crumpled the letter in her fist. "I am completely alone." "You are not alone," he said, taking her shoulders gently. "You have me, you have a place here for as long as you want it." She looked up at him, tears still flowing. "Why are you so kind to me? You do not owe me anything. You saved my life, you have fed and sheltered me for weeks, and I can never repay you." "I do not want repayment, I want—" He stopped, realizing he was about to cross a line he had been carefully avoiding. "What do you want?" she whispered. "You," he admitted, the word torn from somewhere deep inside him. "I want you to stay because I cannot imagine this place without you anymore. I want to hear you humming while you cook. I want to see you riding out to check the cattle with me." I want to fall asleep knowing you are in the next room and wake up to find you making coffee. I want you, Miriam, but I know I have no right to say so. Why do you have no right? Because you are vulnerable. Because you depend on me. Because your husband has been dead less than 2 months, and what kind of man would I be to pressure you when you are grieving? Robert has been dead 6 weeks, she said quietly, and I have been falling in love with you for at least 4 of them. The words hit him like a physical blow. What? I loved Robert, but it was the love of friendship and convenience, just as I said. What I feel for you is different. It terrifies me because it is so strong. You are in my thoughts constantly. I listen for your footsteps, I watch the road for your return, I find excuses to be near you. And I thought I was going mad because surely no decent woman falls in love so quickly after losing her husband. You are not going mad, he said, his hands tightening on her shoulders. And you are very much a decent woman, but Miriam, I need you to be sure. I need you to know that if we move forward with this, I will not let you leave. I will want you here forever as my wife, as my partner in all things. I do not want to leave, she said. I want to stay right here with you for the rest of my life. He kissed her then, unable to hold back any longer. She melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck as she kissed him back with a passion that set his blood on fire. It was nothing like the comfortable affection he had shared with Sarah. This was wild and desperate, years of loneliness and loss pouring out in the way they clung to each other. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I will court you properly. We will wait a respectable amount of time before we marry. I will not have people in town saying I took advantage of you. I do not care what people in town say. I do. I care about your reputation. We will do this right. She smiled, her fingers tracing his jaw. You are a good man, Zachary Vaughn. I am a man in love with you. That makes me selfish and possessive and entirely improper, but I cannot help it. Then be selfish. Be possessive. Just do not stop looking at me the way you are looking at me right now. He kissed her again, softer this time, savoring the taste and feel of her. When they parted, he said, I am going to Beaver tomorrow to speak with the preacher. We will post banns and do this properly. Can you wait 3 weeks, if I must? But Zachary, I am already yours. The ceremony will just make it official. Those 3 weeks were the longest of Zachary's life. He courted Miriam with a propriety that frustrated them both, stealing kisses on the porch, but never allowing things to go further. They held hands during meals, sat close on the porch in the evenings, and talked for hours about their future together. I want children, she told him one night. At least 3 or 4 if God wills it. I want that too. I want this house filled with noise and chaos and laughter. Will you teach our sons to be ranchers like you, if that is what they want, and our daughters too if they are interested? A woman should know how to manage land and animals. You are a progressive thinker for a cowboy. I am a practical thinker. Out here, everyone needs to know how to do everything. Gender does not matter much when you are fighting to survive. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I love you. I love you too, more than I thought possible. The wedding took place on a Sunday in late August at the small church in Beaver. The whole town turned out, curious about the rancher who had kept to himself for 5 years, suddenly marrying a woman who had appeared from nowhere. Zachary wore his only suit, brushed clean and mended by Miriam's skilled hands. She wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself from fabric he had bought in town, and she looked more beautiful than any woman he had ever seen. They spoke their vows in front of the preacher and God and the gathered townspeople, promising to love and honor each other until death parted them. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary kissed her with all the pent-up passion of the past 3 weeks, drawing a scandalized gasp from some of the older women and knowing laughter from the men. They rode back to the ranch in the wagon, Miriam sitting close beside him, her hand on his thigh in a gesture of possessive affection that made his heart race. He had prepared the house as best he could, cleaning everything thoroughly and filling vases with wildflowers he had ridden out to pick at dawn. "It is beautiful," she said when they entered. "You did all this for me, for us, for our first night as husband and wife." She turned to him, her gray-blue eyes dark with desire. "Then let us not waste another moment." He lifted her into his arms and carried her to the bedroom, kicking the door shut behind them. They came together with the desperate hunger of two people who had been denied too long, learning each other's bodies with hands and mouths and whispered words of love. She was everything he had dreamed of and more, responsive and passionate, meeting his desire with her own. Afterward they lay tangled together in the sheets, her head on his chest as he stroked her long dark hair. "I never knew it could be like that," she murmured. "With Robert it was quick and somewhat awkward. This was perfect," he supplied. "Yes, perfect. We have the rest of our lives to make it even better." She laughed, a sound of pure joy. "You are insatiable. Only for you." They spent their wedding night exploring each other, talking and loving and planning their future. When dawn finally broke, they were both exhausted and completely happy. Life settled into a new rhythm over the following months. They worked the ranch together, Miriam proving herself invaluable as both a partner and a worker. She had a gift with the cattle, a gentle patience that made even the most skittish animals calm under her touch. She also began keeping better records of the ranch's finances, her neat handwriting filling ledgers with income and expenses. "We could expand," she said one evening as they reviewed the books together. "We have enough money saved to buy another 10 head, maybe more if we are careful. I was thinking the same thing, and I want to build a proper barn before winter. That lean-to will not protect the animals once the snow comes. A barn would be good, and maybe we could think about adding rooms to the house. If we are going to have children, we will need more space." He pulled her onto his lap, kissing her neck. "Are you telling me something?" "Not yet. But I hope to be soon." By December, she was pregnant. They were both overjoyed, making plans for the nursery and arguing good-naturedly about names. Zachary built the barn with help from a few men he hired from town, and he added 2 new rooms to the house, one for the baby and one as a proper parlor. Miriam's pregnancy was not easy. She suffered from terrible morning sickness that lasted well past the first 3 months, and by her 7th month, her feet and hands had swollen so badly she could barely walk. Zachary doted on her constantly, bringing her whatever she needed, rubbing her aching feet, holding her when she cried from frustration and discomfort. "I am sorry," she sobbed one particularly difficult night. "I am so useless like this. You are growing our child. That is the most important work in the world. Everything else can wait. But the ranch, the animals, all the cooking and cleaning, will all be here when you feel better. Right now, you need to rest and take care of yourself." The baby came in June of 1882, during a thunderstorm that shook the rafters of their house. The midwife from Beaver had come to stay the week before, sensing the birth was imminent. Zachary paced outside for 8 hours while Miriam labored, praying harder than he had since the war. When the baby's first cry split the air, he burst through the door to find Miriam exhausted but smiling, holding a red-faced, squalling infant. "A son," the midwife announced. "A healthy baby boy." Zachary knelt beside the bed, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his wife and child. "He is perfect. You are perfect." "Hello, Matthew," Miriam whispered to the baby, who had stopped crying and was staring up at her with unfocused eyes. They had chosen the name weeks ago after Zachary's father. Welcome to the world. Zachary reached out a tentative finger and the baby's tiny hand wrapped around it with surprising strength. Love flooded through him, fierce and protective and overwhelming. I will keep you both safe, he vowed. Always. Matthew proved to be a good baby, healthy and strong. He nursed well and grew quickly, his eyes eventually settling into the same blue-gray as his mother's. Zachary was besotted, spending hours just watching his son sleep or playing with his tiny fingers and toes. You are going to spoil him, Miriam teased one evening, watching as Zachary rocked the baby for the third time that hour. He is my son. I am allowed to spoil him. What happens when we have more? You cannot spoil all of them. Watch me. She laughed, the sound filling their home with warmth and joy. Life continued its rhythm. The ranch prospered under their joint management, growing from 20 head to 50 over the next 2 years. They hired a hand named Pete to help with the heavier work, a young man from town who proved reliable and hardworking. Miriam managed the household and helped with the bookkeeping while also caring for Matthew, who grew into a bright, curious toddler. In the spring of 1884, their second child arrived, a daughter they named Margaret after Miriam's mother. She had Zachary's dark hair and a temperament as fierce as a wildcat, screaming lustily from the moment she entered the world and rarely stopping except to nurse or sleep. She has your stubbornness, Zachary said fondly, walking the floor with the fussy infant at 2 in the morning. And your lungs, Miriam countered, exhausted but happy. With 2 children and a growing ranch, their days were full to bursting. But they were happy days, filled with laughter and love and the satisfaction of building something together. They had expanded the house again, adding more bedrooms and a proper dining room. The vegetable garden had grown into a large plot that provided most of their food, and Miriam had started raising pigs and expanding the chicken flock. We have done well, Zachary said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching Matthew chase chickens while Margaret napped inside. Better than I ever imagined. You still prefer solitude? Miriam asked with a smile. I prefer you. I prefer this life we have built together. Solitude is overrated. I agree, though sometimes I do miss the quiet. As if on cue, Matthew fell and began wailing, and Margaret's cries joined him from inside the house. Never mind, quiet is also overrated. He laughed and pulled her close, kissing her temple. I love you, Mrs. Vaughn. I love you too. More every day. By 1886, they had 4 children. Their third was another son, Samuel, born in late 1885, followed quickly by another daughter, Sarah, named after Zachary's first wife. Miriam had insisted on the name, saying it was right to honor the woman who had come before. You are generous, Zachary had said, touched by the gesture. She was part of your life, part of what made you the man I love. It would be wrong not to acknowledge that. Their house was now a bustling, noisy place full of children and animals and constant activity. Miriam managed it all with grace and humor, though Zachary could see the exhaustion in her eyes some evenings. He hired a girl from town, Clara, to help with the housework and the children, giving Miriam some relief. The ranch had grown to 150 head of cattle and had become one of the most successful operations in the area. Zachary had bought more land, expanding their holdings to nearly 1,000 acres. They employed 3 hands now, including Pete, who had become more friend than employee, often joining them for meals. You have built an empire, Miriam said one evening as they reviewed the books. From nothing, you have created all this. We created it, he corrected. I could not have done any of this without you. You are the heart of this place. And you are the soul. We balance each other. Always have, from the very beginning. She set down her pen and looked at him seriously. "Do you ever regret it, finding me outside your gate that day? I changed your entire life without asking permission. I regret nothing. Finding you was the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our children, this life we have built together, it is everything I never knew I needed. Even though you wanted solitude. I wanted solitude because I was afraid. Afraid of losing someone again the way I lost Sarah. Afraid of caring too much and getting hurt. But you showed me that hiding from life is not the same as living. You gave me everything, Miriam. You gave me a reason to live again." She came around the table and sat in his lap, something she still did despite being the mother of 4 children. "You saved my life that day. I would have died out there in the heat, and you brought me back. You gave me a home and a family and a love I never thought I would have. I am the lucky one. We are both lucky. Lucky to have found each other, lucky to have this life." They sat together in the quiet house, the children finally asleep, and felt the deep contentment of 2 people who had found their place in the world. The years passed quickly, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Matthew grew into a serious boy who followed his father everywhere, learning the ranch work with dedication and natural skill. Margaret was all fire and passion, refusing to be left behind when her brothers worked with the cattle, proving herself as capable as any boy. Samuel was the gentle one, with a gift for animals that reminded Zachary of Miriam. And Sarah, the youngest, was pure joy, laughing and singing her way through each day. By 1890, Zachary was 45 and Miriam was 31, and they had settled into a comfortable rhythm of life that felt like it would last forever. The children were growing, the ranch was thriving, and their love had deepened into something so solid and real it felt like bedrock beneath their feet. One evening in late summer, after the children were in bed, they sat on the porch as they had done countless times before. Miriam leaned against Zachary's shoulder, his arm around her waist, and they watched the stars come out. "You remember the day I collapsed outside your gate?" she asked. "Every detail. You were nearly dead, covered in blood and bruises, and I had never been so terrified in my life. I remember opening my eyes and seeing you sitting beside the bed. I thought you were an angel at first," he laughed. "No one has ever accused me of being angelic. You were to me. You are to me. You saved my life and then you loved me back to wholeness. You gave me everything I have. And you gave me everything I have. Fair trade, I would say." She tilted her face up to kiss him, a soft brush of lips that still set his heart racing after 9 years of marriage. "More than fair. Perfect." "I never want to live without you," he said suddenly, the words torn from somewhere deep and vulnerable. "The thought terrifies me. Then we will not live without each other. We will grow old together right here on this ranch, watching our grandchildren play in the yard, boring our great-grandchildren with stories about the old days. That sounds perfect. It is perfect. Everything about this life is perfect because we built it together." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the chirp of crickets, the whisper of wind through the grass. This was home. This was everything they had ever wanted or needed. As the years continued to roll by, their children grew into capable adults. Matthew proved to have his father's head for business and his mother's compassion, taking on more responsibility for running the ranch. At 20, he married a girl from Beaver named Elizabeth, and they built a house on the northern section of the property. Their first child, a son named Zachary Jr., arrived in 1892, making Zachary and Miriam grandparents for the first time. "I am too young to be a grandfather," Zachary protested without heat as he held the baby. "You are not too young, you are perfect," Miriam said, watching him with their grandson. You are wonderful with him, just as you were with our children." Margaret, true to her independent spirit, showed no interest in marriage. Instead, she became her father's right hand in managing the cattle, earning respect from the ranch hands and neighboring ranchers alike. By the time she was 18, she could rope and brand better than most men, and she ran the spring roundup with an efficiency that made Zachary proud. Samuel, at 16, announced his intention to become a veterinarian. He had been working with Doc Harrison in Beaver, learning about animal medicine, and his gentle touch with injured creatures was almost miraculous. Zachary and Miriam supported his dream, setting aside money for him to attend veterinary school in Kansas. And Sarah, their youngest at 14 in 1894, was showing signs of becoming a teacher. She loved books and learning, and spent hours teaching the younger children of ranch hands their letters and numbers. "We have raised good children," Miriam said one evening as they watched their family gathered for Sunday dinner. The house was full of noise and laughter, with little Zachary Jr. being passed around and cooed over. "They are all finding their own paths. They are finding paths that make them happy, which is all I ever wanted for them," Zachary replied. "And they are staying close to home, which pleases me more than it probably should. It pleases me too. I like having them near." By 1895, the ranch had grown to become one of the largest in Oklahoma Territory. They ran 300 head of cattle, employed 8 hands, and owned over 2,000 acres. Zachary was 50 years old and starting to feel it in his joints on cold mornings, but he was still strong and capable. Miriam, at 36, was as beautiful as the day he had found her, though her dark hair now had threads of silver, and her face bore the lines of laughter and hard work. They were sitting on the porch one evening in June, watching the sunset, when Miriam said, "I have been thinking about that day you found me." "What about it?" "If that wagon master had not thrown me out, if I had made it to Texas, my whole life would be different. I would have found my sister dead and been truly alone. I might have ended up in some terrible situation, desperate and afraid. Do not think about that. It did not happen. I know. But sometimes I think about how much had to go wrong for things to go so right. My husband dying, being thrown out of the wagon, nearly dying in the heat. All of it was terrible, but it brought me to you. It brought me to this life, and I would not change a single moment of it." He pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "I would not change anything either, except maybe I would have kissed you sooner," she laughed. "You were being proper. It was frustrating but also admirable. I was being terrified. I thought if I touched you too soon, you would realize you could do better and leave." "I could never do better than you, Zachary Vaughn. You are everything I ever wanted and more than I ever dreamed possible. Even though I am getting old and gray, I am getting old and gray too. We will be old and gray together, remember. That was the plan. Best plan I ever made." They kissed as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Below them, the ranch stretched out in all directions, a testament to their hard work and dedication. Behind them, the house was full of the sounds of family, of grandchildren playing and Margaret bossing the ranch hands and Samuel reading medical texts. This was their legacy, their empire, their home. In 1897, Margaret surprised everyone by falling in love with a neighboring rancher named Thomas Fletcher. He was one of the few men who treated her as an equal rather than trying to tame her spirit, and Zachary approved of the match immediately. "He is a good man," he told Margaret. "He will be a good partner for you. He is the only man who has ever looked at me and seen me, really seen me," Margaret replied. "Not just a pretty face or a rancher's daughter, but me, my fire, my strength, all of it, and he loves me for it. That is how it should be." That is how your mother and I are, partners in everything. Margaret married Thomas in a simple ceremony at the ranch, and they chose to live on Thomas's property rather than building on the Vaughn land. But they were close neighbors, and Margaret rode over most days to help with the cattle and visit with her parents. Samuel returned from veterinary school in 1898, fully qualified and ready to set up practice. He built a clinic in Beaver but lived on the ranch, riding out each morning to tend to the animals of the area. His skill became legendary, and people came from miles around seeking his help for their livestock. Sarah, at 18, was teaching at the school in Beaver while living at home. She had a steady beau, the son of the preacher, and Zachary suspected an engagement announcement was coming soon. And Matthew and Elizabeth had given them 2 more grandchildren, twin girls named Emma and Grace, bringing their total number of grandchildren to 3. "We are truly blessed," Miriam said as they celebrated Christmas in 1898, their house filled with children and grandchildren. "Look at all we have." "I am looking," Zachary replied, his arm around her waist, "and I am grateful for every single bit of it." That night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, they lay together in their room, the house finally quiet. "You remember what you said to me the day we met?" Miriam asked. "After I woke up, I said many things. Which part? You said I was safe. That was the first thing you said to me. And I have been safe every day since, safe in your love, safe in this home we built. You have also kept me safe, safe from loneliness, safe from the darkness I was falling into. You saved me just as much as I saved you. Then we saved each other, and we built this beautiful life together. The most beautiful life I could imagine." They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had done for 17 years and would continue to do for many more to come. The turn of the century in 1900 brought changes to Oklahoma Territory. Talk of statehood was increasing, and the old wild ways were giving way to more civilization. Beaver had grown from a small frontier town to a proper community with a school, a church, a bank, and several stores. The railroad had come through, making it easier to ship cattle to market. But on the Vaughn ranch, life continued much as it always had. The rhythms of ranching did not change with the times. Cattle still needed tending, fences still needed mending, and the land still demanded hard work and dedication. Zachary was 55 now and had turned over most of the day-to-day operations to Matthew, though he still rode out most days to check on things. He could not imagine not working, not being part of the land he had built from nothing. Miriam was 41 and had become something of a matriarch in the community. Women came to her for advice on everything from child care to managing household finances. She also worked with the church to help new families settling in the area, remembering what it was like to be alone and desperate. One day in the spring of 1900, a young woman collapsed outside the Vaughn gate. She was found by Pete, who had been with them now for 16 years and was like family. He brought her to the house, and Miriam tended her injuries while Zachary rode for the doctor. The woman's name was Catherine, and she had been traveling with a group heading west when they abandoned her after she fell ill with fever. It was too familiar, too reminiscent of Miriam's own story, and both of them felt compelled to help. They nursed Catherine back to health over several weeks, and she eventually revealed that she had been heading to Oregon to marry a man she had never met, a mail-order bride arrangement. But she had no desire to continue that journey now. "Stay here," Miriam told her. "Work for us until you decide what you want to do next. You do not have to rush into anything." Catherine stayed, becoming a trusted member of their household. She helped with the housework and the grandchildren and eventually caught the eye of Pete. By the end of the year, they were engaged and Pete built a small house on the edge of the property. "We seem to collect people," Zachary observed with amusement. "We collect family," Miriam corrected. "And there is nothing wrong with that." In 1901, Sarah married her preacher's son, Daniel, in a beautiful ceremony at the church. They moved into the parsonage in town, where Sarah continued teaching and Daniel took over his father's duties as the new minister. The ranch now sprawled across 3,000 acres with 400 head of cattle. The Vaughn name was respected throughout the territory, synonymous with hard work, fair dealing, and quality livestock. But more than that, it was synonymous with family and loyalty and love. On their 20th wedding anniversary in August of 1901, Zachary and Miriam renewed their vows in a small ceremony attended by their children and grandchildren. They stood in the same church where they had first married, holding hands as they repeated the promises they had made 2 decades before. "I vow to love you until my last breath," Zachary said, looking into Miriam's gray-blue eyes. "To stand beside you in joy and sorrow, in wealth and poverty, in sickness and health. You are my heart, my home, my everything." "I vow to love you with all that I am," Miriam replied, tears streaming down her face. "To be your partner in all things, to build our life together day by day. You saved me, you loved me, and you never let me leave. And I thank God for that every single day." They kissed to the applause of their family, and Zachary felt his heart swell with so much love he thought it might burst. 20 years. 20 beautiful, difficult, joyful, challenging years. And he would gladly live 20 more and 20 after that, all with this woman by his side. The years continued their steady march. By 1905, Zachary was 60 and Miriam was 46. They had 8 grandchildren now, with more on the way. Matthew and Elizabeth's oldest son, Zachary Jr., was 13 and already showing signs of becoming an excellent rancher. Margaret and Thomas had 2 sons who were terrors on horseback. Samuel had married a woman named Patience, and they had a daughter named Lily. And Sarah and Daniel had welcomed twin boys who kept the parsonage in constant uproar. The ranch was now firmly in Matthew's hands, though Zachary still consulted on major decisions. He spent his days doing lighter work, mending tack, helping with the horses, and playing with his grandchildren. Miriam had slowed down as well, though she still managed the household accounts and oversaw the large garden that fed their extended family. They spent most evenings on the porch, watching the sun set over their land, talking about the past and the future and everything in between. "Do you ever think about that day?" Miriam asked one evening. "The day you found me, all the time," Zachary admitted. "I think about how easily I could have been working in a different part of the ranch, how I might not have seen you in time. How my whole life could be different if I had been 10 minutes later. I think about how close I came to dying, how I had given up, accepted that I was going to die alone in the dirt, and then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I did not have the strength to speak." "God brought us together," Zachary said. "I am sure of it. Everything that happened, all the terrible things that brought you to my gate, they were part of a plan bigger than us. I believe that too, and I am grateful for every moment, even the painful ones, because they brought us here." He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, only slightly different now with age. "I love you more today than I did yesterday, and less than I will tomorrow. That is the most romantic thing you have ever said to me. I am getting sentimental in my old age. I like it." "Say more romantic things," he laughed, the sound rich and warm in the evening air. "You are more beautiful today than the day I met you. You are my sun and moon and stars. You are the reason I wake up smiling and go to bed grateful. You are everything good in my life, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." She turned in his arms and kissed him, deep and passionate despite their years together. "I love you, Zachary Vaughn, forever and always." Forever and always, he echoed. By 1907, Oklahoma had achieved statehood, bringing new opportunities and challenges. The territory they had helped tame was now officially part of the United States, and the changes were both exciting and bittersweet. The old Wild West was truly gone now, replaced by law and order and civilization. But on the Vaughn Ranch, the work continued. Cattle still needed tending, though modern methods made it easier than the old days. They had telephone lines now, connecting them to beaver and the wider world. Automobiles were becoming more common, though Zachary still preferred his horse. At 62, he was still strong and active, though his hair was completely gray and his face was weathered from decades under the sun. Miriam at 48 had grown softer with age, her figure fuller and her face lined with the evidence of a life well lived. But to Zachary, she was as beautiful as ever. Their family continued to grow. Margaret and Thomas had welcomed a daughter, breaking their streak of boys. Samuel and Patience had 3 children now. Sarah and Daniel had 5, cementing their reputation as the most prolific of the Vaughn children. And Matthew and Elizabeth had 6 children ranging from 21 to 8 years old. "We have created a dynasty," Miriam joked one Sunday when the entire family gathered for dinner. The house and yard were full of children and grandchildren, the noise level incredible, the love even more so. "We have created a family," Zachary corrected. "That is better than any dynasty." As the sun began to set, painting the Oklahoma sky in brilliant colors, Zachary found a quiet moment with his wife. They stood together watching their grandchildren play, Matthew and Margaret checking on the cattle, Samuel tending to a horse with a minor injury, Sarah helping Elizabeth with the younger children. "This is what I saw that day," Miriam said softly. "When I opened my eyes and saw you sitting beside the bed, I saw all of this, our whole future spread out before us, and I knew I was home." "You were home," he agreed. "You have been home ever since, and you will always be home here with me." "Always," she promised. In the years that followed, they settled into the comfortable rhythm of elderly couple who had loved each other well. They still worked, though less strenuously than before. They still sat on the porch every evening, watching the sun set over their empire. They still loved with a passion that made their children smile and their grandchildren giggle. By 1910, when Zachary was 65 and Miriam was 51, they had 16 grandchildren with another on the way. The ranch had expanded to include Matthew's holdings as well as portions of land purchased from retiring neighbors. The Vaughn name was known throughout Oklahoma, synonymous with quality and integrity. But more than any business success, more than any material wealth, they had their love. It had sustained them through good times and bad, through joy and sorrow, through every challenge life had thrown at them. It was the foundation upon which everything else was built. One warm summer evening, as they sat on the porch watching yet another stunning sunset, Miriam said, "I would like to be buried here on this land. When the time comes, I want to rest here forever." That is a grim topic for such a beautiful evening. I am being practical. We are not young anymore, Zachary. We need to talk about these things. Fine. Then I want to be buried beside you, right here on the land we built together. We will rest here for eternity, watching over our family. That sounds perfect. They sat in silence for a while, hands clasped, watching as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple. "You have any regrets?" Zachary asked suddenly. "None, not a single one. You? Only that I did not find you sooner. Think of all the years we could have had. We have had enough years. More than enough. We have had a lifetime of love, and it has been extraordinary." "It has," he agreed. "Every single day with you has been a gift." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they remained on the porch, comfortable in their silence and their love. Inside, they could hear Matthew and Elizabeth putting the youngest grandchildren to bed. In the distance, cattle lowed peacefully. The smell of Miriam's roses, planted years ago and now covering the entire side of the house, perfumed the air. This was home. This was family. This was love. The following years passed in a blur of joy and routine. More grandchildren arrived, and the first great-grandchildren as Matthew and Elizabeth's oldest children began families of their own. The ranch continued to prosper under Matthew's capable management, with Margaret and Thomas's operation merging with the main holdings to create an even larger enterprise. Zachary and Miriam became the beloved patriarch and matriarch. Their wisdom sought on everything from ranching decisions to family matters. They presided over Sunday dinners that grew larger every year, their table extending to accommodate the growing family. They attended weddings and christenings, celebrations and memorials. They lived fully and loved deeply, right up until the end. In the spring of 1915, Zachary fell ill with pneumonia. At 70 years old, his body could not fight it off as easily as it once might have. Miriam nursed him devotedly, sitting by his bedside day and night, holding his hand and talking to him even when he could not respond. "You cannot leave me," she whispered one night when his breathing was particularly labored. "We are supposed to grow old together. We are supposed to watch our great-great-grandchildren play in this yard. You promise me forever." His eyes opened, focusing on her face with effort. "Forever," he rasped. "Love you, forever. I love you too, so much, more than my own life. No regrets. None, not a single one." He smiled weakly, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. "Collapsed, outside my gate, best day of my life." Tears streamed down her face. "Mine too. You saved me and then you loved me and you never let me leave. And it was the most beautiful life I could have imagined." "Not leaving," he said with difficulty. "Never leaving, always, with you." But despite his words, despite their prayers and hopes, Zachary Vaughn passed away 3 days later, surrounded by his wife and children, with the spring breeze blowing through the open window and the smell of Miriam's roses filling the air. He was buried on a hill overlooking the ranch, in the spot he and Miriam had chosen years before. The entire county came to pay their respects to a man who had built something remarkable not just in land and cattle, but in family and love. Miriam stood at his graveside long after everyone else had left, her hand resting on the fresh dirt. "I will see you again," she said quietly. "But not yet. I still have work to do here. I still have grandchildren to watch grow, great-grandchildren to meet. But I will come to you when my time arrives, and we will spend eternity together, just as we promised." She lived for 3 more years, years spent with her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She continued to manage the household accounts and tend her garden. She sat on the porch every evening, though now alone, watching the sun set over the land she and Zachary had built together. And she talked to him constantly, telling him about the new babies, about Matthew's latest success with the cattle, about Margaret's son who was turning out to be a gifted horseman, about Samuel's daughter who wanted to become a doctor, about Sarah's grandchildren who were growing like weeds. In the summer of 1918, at the age of 59, Miriam died peacefully in her sleep. She was buried beside Zachary on the hill overlooking the ranch, exactly as they had planned. 2 headstones stood side by side, marking the resting place of a man and woman who had found each other against all odds and had built a love that would be remembered for generations. The ranch continued under Matthew's care, passed down through the generations of Vaughns who followed. The house was expanded and modernized, but the original structure remained, preserved as a testament to the two people who had started it all. The story of how Miriam collapsed outside Zachary's gate, how he nursed her back to health and loved her for the rest of his life, became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. And on summer evenings, when the sun sets over the Oklahoma prairie in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, some say you can see two figures sitting on that old porch, holding hands and watching over the land and family they built together. Forever and always, just as they promised. Together in life and death, bound by a love that transcended time and circumstance, proof that sometimes the worst moments lead to the best lives, and that true love, once found, never truly dies.